Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavallabha Srila Prabhupada always sang this before his classes. It brings so much emotion that sometimes his voice would crack, because he said that it's just like bringing Vrindavan. It's just like everything is there. The gopis, Govardhan Hill, everything. It's just like brings Vrindavan into the temple room. So what shall we talk about tonight? Any questions on your mind? I was asking Srila Prabhupada, what should I talk about? And I was thinking that maybe I should talk about most of the memories about Prabhupada that I've been talking about have been for 67, 68. And I was thinking, well, I don't think I've spoken anything about later, because when I met him in 67, but then in India, I was in India with him in 77, which is 10 years later. And that was the year before he left this world. So I was thinking maybe I should talk about that, because I've never talked to Siddhanta, and that was a very special year. We went to India. Actually, I went with my friend Kusha Devi, who is my close friend for many, many years. The two of us and her 3-year-old child. We flew into Delhi, went to Vrindavan, and Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, and he was holding court in his room. And we went in, and he was very kind. He says, Govinda, Dasi, you have come. And Kusha also. And we offered him a $100 bill. We didn't have that much, so that's what we offered him. And then he began to talk about how, she is very rich man's daughter, because all of these Indian people were there, and I guess they're impressed by wealth. And so he was talking about, sometimes he did that, because he was just saying that, look, they have everything in America, but they are coming to Vrindavan for the real thing. They're coming to Krishna consciousness. And so sometimes he would talk like that if there were a lot of Indian professional type people there. And so the adventure began. From Vrindavan, we went to Mumbai. And they were building the temple there in Mumbai at the time. It wasn't built yet, but it was still a construction site. And Prabhupada climbed the stairs and went up into we also went looking around at the construction of his room where everything was. He wanted to build, it was Juhu. He wanted to build Juhu up because he wanted that the Indian people are always going to the cinema, and he wanted to make it so that something so attractive that on the weekend they would come to the temple. And that's why he wanted an auditorium with a stage for dramas, for bhajans, for plays, like that. And so we were in Bombay for some time. While I was in Vrindavan, my god sister Himavati was there. And Himavati was Hansaduta's wife, as you know, or as you may know. And Himavati was in pretty bad shape. She was grieving because Hansaduta had taken sannyas. I was just reading Vedavyasa's book today. It was reminding me. And so she had all these shalagrams lined up on the window, and she insisted on giving me one. I really did not want a shalagram. I was only in my late 20s. No, not even in my late 20s. I guess I was 26 or something like that. Anyway, it's very strict worship, and I did not want a shalagram, but she insisted. So I packaged it up very nicely, put it in a nice little box, and thought, I'll give it to Srila Prabhupada in Bombay. So I did. I gave him the shalagram in Bombay, and he picked it up like this. Not shalagram, Shiv shalagram. Not very important. And put it back in the box. And of course I still have it to this day.
What did he say?
Huh?
What did he say?
Can't hear you, my friend.
What did Prabhupada say?
Well, Shiv shalagram. It was a Shivalingam, but she didn't know, Himavati didn't know. She just, it looked similar, you know, but Prabhupada immediately could tell Shiv shalagram. Because I did not, I mean, shalagram worship is very strict, and I was traveling, I was a young girl, I wasn't ready for that kind of worship yet. And it's very strict. So it's supposed to be very strict. A lot of people do it, and it's not very strict, but I'm not willing to do that. Anyway, so then we were in Bombay, and it was very wonderful. Bombay was preaching. His preaching in India was so different from his preaching in the West. I'm sure if you've taken the time to listen to some of his lectures in America and some of his lectures in India, there's a huge difference. Actually, wherever he went, he was able to ascertain the audience capacity, you might say. So I watched him preach to. There was on one particular day. Every day I was in his room there, and on one particular day there was a very beautiful yogi teacher of some sort came. He was young. He looked Bengali, and he was very nicely dressed, you know, with the slightly long hair and very beautiful features. And he was a yoga acharya of some sort. And Srila Prabhupada preached to him for so long, and this is the trip to India in 1976-77. So he preached to him for so long, and I was so impressed. I was so impressed with his preaching in India that after the yogi left, and I had some medicine that I had brought from America for him, and I was giving him the medicine, and I said, Srila Prabhupada, you're preaching in India. You're so wonderful. I was really in awe, you know, and he got really shy, and he said, Hare Krishna, like that. It was really, really sweet. He was like, I was just flabbergasted at how, because I hadn't been to India and seen this. I hadn't seen his preaching. See, a lot of devotees went to India early on. They went in 71, 72. But my husband didn't feel that we could do it. We were running Hawaii. We had temples on all the islands, and my health was fragile. I was always fragile. I couldn't. He didn't want us to go, so he told Prabhupada that he didn't think we could do it at this time. Plus, he was GBC for South America. And he had his hands, we had our hands full. So my soonest time that I finally was able to go to India was in 1976. And that was after Gorsundra had left. And so I spent several months there then. And so anyway, he was preaching beautifully in Bombay. And there were some other incidents in Bombay. There's videos of him up on the roof and talking, and people coming and going, and it was just so informal and so beautiful there with the palm trees in the background and everything. So anyway, Prabhupada wanted to go to the Kumbh Mela. That was impossible. You could not get a ticket. This was the biggest Mela in 144 years. It's every 12 years, you know, there's a Kumbh Mela at Allahabad. And that's where the drops of nectar came from the Triveni, they call it. One of the rivers is under the ground, but the other two are on top, the Ganga. And anyway, there's a whole story about it, which most of you probably know, that if you take bath at Makara Sankranti, which is the first day of Capricorn, if you take bath at particular times, then you're guaranteed liberation. So naturally, 20 million people come. Because it's India. They all want liberation. They're aware of this. So it's huge. And every year, it's 12 years. And every 12 years, they have it there. And then they have also some smaller ones in Haridwar. I've been to the one in Haridwar, in Rishikesh also. And anyway, so, not Rishikesh, Haridwar. Anyway, so Prabhupada wanted to go to the Mela. But there's no way to go to the Mela because people have booked their tickets years in advance. The trains are like arms and legs hanging off of them. You know, you see how Indian trains are. And the buses, even worse, arms and legs and people all over the buses. There's no way to get in. And he started to have some swelling in his hands. I noticed he was having some swelling in his hands and feet at that time. And I was expressed concern, you know. And his doctor told him he can't fly because it has to do with the heart when you have the swelling in the hands and the feet. I didn't know that much about medicine at that time. I wish I did, but maybe I could have been more of a help. But anyway, he wanted to go, and everyone told him he couldn't go, but he was hell-bent and determined to go. In other words, it's one of the biggest preaching opportunities in India that ever happens, and this is the 144-year one, Mela. So, by chance, there's no way he could go. It was like but he was still wanting to go, and by chance, there was a man named Mr. Gupta, who he happened to be the head of Victoria Station. That's the Indian Railway station in Bombay. And he had become a life member just 2 months before. So we talked to him, and he agreed to put 2 cars onto a train. And if anybody's been to India, that's inconceivable. It is the most, maybe next to Switzerland, the most bureaucratic rules, red tape type of country that you can even imagine. There's no way that could even happen. It's a dream, but he did it. He put 2 cars. He added a first-class car with there's little coupes, they're like little rooms. You close the door and lock them. And then he also added a second-class car for the devotees, because there were many, many devotees going. And so the adventure began. And we were traveling, my girlfriend Kusha and I, we were girls in our 20s. So we were traveling first class coupe everywhere because of the fact you could lock the door. You know, we wanted to be safe, you might say. Although really India wasn't that unsafe at that time. But this is before all the satellite television and internet and pornography and insanity that you see now. It was long before that. It was still relatively pure, although there were some problems. I remember Indira Gandhi at that time was doing some weird stuff. She was sterilizing. She was on a big genocidal campaign. I remember seeing billboards. I couldn't read them, but I could figure them out. And she was forcibly sterilizing sadhus from Vrindavan, meaning driving trucks through and forcibly taking them. I mean, they were already celibate, but she's like demoniac, really. And forcible sterilization, I don't know how they did it, but anyway, that was what was going on. And I remember Prabhupada saying that when she was killed, they, I don't know about if I should say this stuff publicly, this goes on YouTube. Prabhupada said that she was, Krishna put up with her. So up until the point that she started harassing the residents of Vrindavan. And I know, my first trip to Vrindavan, the streets were bare. Where are all the beggars? Where are all the sadhus? And then I met a very good friend, she's still my friend, at Radha Damodar Temple, in front of the deities at Radha Damodar Temple, another whitey, if she was from England. And she took me round and showed me what was going on. That's how I knew what was going on. She knocked on these little doors. They're about this high off the ground, and little doors, and she knocked on them and opened them, and there's like these frightened little old lady there inside with her deities, frightened because they don't want to be hauled away by the trucks. And so all the streets were empty. And I remember she was, she knew Hindi. The girl, her name was, what was her name? Oh gosh. Okay, it'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, she explained to me what was going on. And then later Prabhupada talked about it and said this is why Indira Gandhi was stopped. Because she was harassing, she was doing so many things that were not good. But when she started harassing the citizens of the Brijbasis, the sadhus, no, that's when he put a stop to it. He will not tolerate that. He protects the residents of Vrindavan. So anyway, that was before we went to Bombay. As I'm remembering things, I'm just, this is very informal. So anyway, we were in Bombay, and Kusha and I, since we were traveling by coupe, we gave Mr. Gupta our money for our ticket, and we had no idea exactly what was going on, because this is our first trip to India. We were not seasoned India travelers yet. And so then when we got on the train, actually before we got on the train, we arrived at the train station, and because Kumbh Mela, it was a real madhouse. It's always a madhouse in an Indian train station. If you've been to India, you know what I mean. People walking by with trunks on their heads, and it's just a madhouse. You've been to India, you know what I mean. And so somehow or other, when we arrived, Prabhupada and Rameshwar arrived there, but nobody else. And Kusha was taking care, I don't know, where was Kusha? She was taking care of the luggage or something. And so we ended up, just me and Rameshwar, standing there with Prabhupada. And where's all the devotees? I guess they were on their way. And there's these trunks flying by and people going by. And I said, Rameshwar, use your danda, let's protect him. And so he picked up his danda, and I was very tall for India. I'm 5'4", that's not so tall, but for India, I'm tall. So I put my arms out like this, and Prabhupada was standing right in between us. Rameshwar put out his stick, his danda stick, and I put my arms out like this, and we were like protecting him from the trunks and all the madness going by. Anyway, that was kind of a fun thing that happened. And so then we got on the train, and we got on the train. I was surprised because we didn't really know what we just gave our money for the ticket. We didn't really know what was going to happen. And so what happened was that we were in the coupe right next to Prabhupada's. And the Mr. Gupta had not only added 2 trains to the India train that was going into Allahabad that was packed full. He had also painted the coupe that Prabhupada was in. It was a 4-pay. There were four bucks in his coupe. There were 2 in ours. And he had painted them, and he had garlands strung, hanging in the top of from the fans and everything. And he also sent his servant, his personal house servant, he sent him along too to take care of Prabhupada, make sure if he had any need or anything like that. So when we got in the train, we had our luggage safely in and everything. Kusha and I were in the coupe next door, and we could hear Prabhupada talking. We went back and forth to his coupe. Then I remembered, oh my gosh, I remembered that 10 years before in Los Angeles, one day Prabhupada had walked into the room while I was sitting on the floor reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, not the one that he did, but the one that was like an Indian translation. And it was in January, which means the Mela was going on. It always goes on in January, February, because that's when Makara Sankranti is, which is the first day of Capricorn. And so, the sun moving into Capricorn. And so, he had come into the room, it was on his mind, and he was going on and about, there's a big fair in India. It's called Kumbh Mela. And people come there from all over India because you're guaranteed liberation by taking bath in the Triveni. And he said, there are yogis, 800-year-old yogis that come there. They don't come out of their caves, but they come for the Kumbh Mela. And I was into yoga, so I was like, oh, really? I'm really interested in that, you know. And so he was telling me all about the Kumbh Mela, and then I remember he walked out of the room, and as he was walking out of the room, he said, you would like it, I shall take you. And here it is, 10 years later, I'm sitting in a train. We didn't even know when we went to India that it was the year of the Mela. Kusha and I, back then there was no internet, we had no idea we were going the year of the 144-year Mela. Well, maybe Kusha did, no, I don't think she did. I'll have to ask her. But we didn't know. But we had walked in, we had come to India in November, and now it was January, and here we were off to the Mela. So what was so wonderful too was, like I said, the train stations were madhouses. So it was, I don't know how they arranged this, really. I mean, without internet, somehow or other they arranged it. Hansaduta had these buses, these big Mercedes buses in India. And Mr. Gupta arranged for the train to stop in the desert, in the middle of nowhere, so that we could not have to, so that Prabhupada didn't have to go through the crazy Allahabad train station. So it was in the middle of the night. We stopped, I don't know what town it was. I mean, I have no idea. But we stopped, we got off the train, and there were these big buses, two huge buses of Hansadutas, and all of these devotees got in the buses, and Prabhupada's car was there, his little ambassador car with the two little flags, you know, and the black plate. I mean, I loved seeing him ride in that car with those flags, you know, and a plaque on the side. Anyway, so in the middle of the night, the train stopped. I mean, can you imagine? Anybody that's been to India, I don't know how they pulled this off. No internet, no. How did they do it? I still don't know. The phones rarely worked. I mean, making a phone call could take all day. Mailing a letter could take half a day, you know. So anyway, we got off, we got in the buses, and then we were taken to the camp. The camp was like tents, and there were thousands, millions of people there, millions of tents, and most of them were wearing saffron, meaning there's lots and lots of saffron tents. Years later, I went to another Mela. I went to one in Haridwar, but I was alone. It was years later, alone, and I got lost, and it was getting dark, and how do you find your people when they're all wearing saffron? Finally, I was like getting desperate. And I asked, I got picked up I found some policemen, and they drove me around the Mela to find which bunch of saffrons, you know, it was like that. So many millions and millions. I mean, as far as the eye could see, you could see tents. Because this is like a really big event. And there's Shaivites, you know, the guys that wear the ash, and they wear like chains and nothing more, or maybe they don't even wear that. And they come in on big elephants with mahants, they call them mahants. I mean, they really get into some of these power trips. I mean, guys really know how to do power trips in India, especially these mahants. Anyway, so we were taken to our tent. And I got really lucky. I had some straw. I don't know where I got the straw, but I managed to put a little bit of straw underneath my sleeping bag. So I had a little bit of, because the desert floor gets very cold. It's very cold in January in Allahabad. Not snowing type cold, but a kind of a dry, you know what the cold in Vrindavan is like. It's a bone-chilling cold. It doesn't snow in Vrindavan, but boy, it feels colder than where there's snow. I don't know why. I have no idea, but it's like a very dry cold. Anyway, so so this is a trip down memory lane tonight. I guess that's what I'm supposed to talk about. Everybody seems to like it. I don't know, maybe Mr. Ananta Krishna, you're not bored, are you?
Me?
Okay.
No, actually it's very interesting.
So anyway, we were there in the Mela, and Prabhupada was not happy with the location. Bhagwat was in charge of getting the location, but unfortunately he had become sick, I think with malaria or hepatitis or both or something, and so he had been somehow not gotten the best location. I don't know exactly what happened, but Prabhupada was somewhat disgruntled, but still there was a lot that was happening. There was a lot of preaching work going on, and the devotees went out every day with books. Whole legions of devotees were going out with books. And then Srila Prabhupada wanted milk, but there was no milk. I mean, really, we were in the wilderness. And so Mr. Gupta had come by train, because after all, he's the head of the train, he's the head guy of the railway, so he can take any train he wants. And I told him Prabhupada wants milk. So he said, no problem, I shall bring a cow coming in from the next train. So he put a whole cow on a train and brought the cow into the Mela so that Prabhupada had fresh milk. Anyway, these are the kind of miracles that happened around Srila Prabhupada regularly. And so many things happened there. I suppose I should talk about the fact that there were many sannyasis there. But Prabhupada was very, very, he was very displeased. And Kusha and I were behind the tent flap, so nobody could see us, but we could hear everything and see everything. And he was yelling. I don't know if this is recorded or not. I don't know if that meeting was recorded, but it would be in January 77 for those of you who are Veda basers. And he was yelling, saying, this is not sannyas. This is not the meaning of sannyas. You are making a farce, a mockery. He was he said, no more sannyas, because so many had fallen down, and those who hadn't fallen down were living like little kings. And that's, when he first gave the first sannyas to 4 devotees, they were sent out to preach, to travel and preach, not to stay in one place and accumulate wealth, because that's what householders are supposed to do. They're supposed to stay in one place and accumulate wealth and do management. And I probably get in trouble for saying some of this. Anyway, one thing that also happened, anyway, he was very displeased. And I don't think this is secret information, because he did say, after that time, he didn't want any more sannyas. I think he did give some Indian sannyas, but he didn't want any more sannyas. How it continued, I don't know. But it did, and it was more or less a disaster, as we all know. So then Prabhupada was daily, they brought him the water, because for him to go down to the river would have been very difficult, his health at that time. So they brought him the water from the Triveni to take bath at the appropriate time. And I remember some of the devotees were asking, there's like 2 or 3 times where you can take bath, like particular astrological timing, nakshatras or whatever, I don't know. they're like, and when that happens, when those special times happen, it's like a stampede. I mean, people sometimes get stampeded. I almost got stampeded in the Haridwar, and I was in the middle of the road, spaced out, and somebody grabbed me and pulled me back just as this troop of Shaivites came by on an elephant, you know. So it's not a lightweight experience. Going to Kumbh Mela is not a lightweight experience. In fact, most people thought we were crazy that he had a 3-year-old with us, but we didn't know any better. We were just girls, young girls. So then, what was I going to tell you about? There was preaching going on every day. There was deities. There were people that would come to the tent. Prabhupada didn't do that much preaching there. He mostly preached to the devotees, because there were a lot of his disciples there. Like I said, 2 of Hansadutta's buses full of devotees were traveling at that time. It was really like an intense, very intense time. He only stayed about 4 or 5 days because it was very cold, for one thing. Now, Kusha and I, we went into the Triveni at the appointed time and managed to go in without getting trampled or stampeded, but sometimes some people do. People are actually killed by the stampede sometime. It's crazy. India's got its crazy side, you know. Anyway, so he only stayed there, I think, 4 or 5 days. I can't remember exactly how long, but it was very cold, and his health was not really that good at that time. And so, true to form, Mr. Gupta hooked up from Bombay, another two cars on an Indian train, drove them all the way across India, empty, inconceivable. Anybody from India knows this is inconceivable, but I'm telling you the truth, it really happened. And again, we rode in the buses, and we got on. I don't think we did it in the middle of the night. We might have. We boarded the train, same thing. Prabhupada had his coupe, and ours was right next to it. And then there was a second-class car where all the devotees rode. I mean, the reason we rode in first-class coupe is because we had a child, and we were 2 girls traveling alone. And we didn't know India. We didn't know. We wanted to be safe, you know. So then we went, from there we went to Calcutta and Mayapur. Hare Krishna.
Nice to see you.
Where were you?
I was speaking Dasi.
Anyway, I'm just talking about India a little bit.
Oh, amazing.
When we went to India in 77, 76 and 77. And so then we went to Calcutta, and Prabhupada was in the Calcutta temple, and then we went to Mayapur, and actually in Mayapur was the last time I saw him. I wish I had stayed in India longer at that time, but my visa was expiring, and I guess we didn't really know how to do that at that time. But when we were leaving the Mela, and this is significant, some of the sannyasis, I don't know why, I think it was Rameshwara though, because Kusha told me it was, they wanted for the ladies to stay at the Mela. But for 2 girls with a kid to stay at the Mela would have been sure death. That would have been impossible. No way to get out. And Prabhupada he stopped them. He said, no, the women and children come with us. He knew very well that it was absolutely dangerous for us to stay alone without, it's like camping out. It's very difficult. I mean, most people got really sick there. We didn't get sick, but most of the devotees did get hepatitis. That's because we didn't. I I was a real fanatic. I had a water distiller, and I was squatting. I've got pictures of me squatting down in the sand, distilling water in the middle of the Rajasthani desert, because we didn't eat the food either. We starved before. We were very careful. We cooked our own food, so we didn't get malaria or we didn't get hepatitis, which was the going thing at that time. Because we used mosquito nets. We had a lot of things that we, had heard from. Mataji had really prepared me for India before I went. He had lived in India. He knew the ropes, and so he really gave me a lot of information on that. So anyway, we went to Mayapur, and I remember those incredible. I think those kirtans in Mayapur, 1977. Were some of the most famous kirtans that ever existed in this movement. They were just incredible. It was like Prabhupada circumambulating along with all of the devotees, and we were there too. There wasn't all this weird stuff that happens nowadays, with the women thing. It was like he was circumambulating the deities and the whole flock of devotees following along, and then they would hit the bell, the bell that's, and it was so ecstatic. We had a wonderful time in Mayapur, but Prabhupada's health was frail at that time, and we had to go back to America. I guess I can add that to my list of things that I regret, that if I should have stayed longer, but we didn't. We went back to America, and we had no idea that he was going to leave this world only a few months later. We had no idea. It was inconceivable. He was going full throttle, in Mayapur. He was walking around the whole temple room with huge flocks of devotees chanting. And I think there are videos, aren't there? It was really wonderful. And mostly Madhavisa leading. No, it wasn't Madhavisa. He couldn't have been there because he had left just before. It was different. It was Hansaduta then. That would have been Hansaduta leading, not Madhavisa. Madhavisa was one of the best kirtan leaders, but I think it was Hansaduta. Anyway, my memory is only so good. I mean, after all, so much happened. And then from there we went to Puri. Kusha and I went to Puri. And then Prabhupada came down. He came down to Puri and Bhubaneswar. We went to Puri and Bhubaneswar. And what happened in Puri was one of the most historic, incredible, flabbergasting things that I ever saw, because we were in Puri for about a week before Prabhupada came, because we were, Lord Nishingadev is going to bed now. So we were in Puri, and we met some of the people there. There were pandas, pandas that try to take you around and get money. They're like guides or something. And so we knew a little bit about the politics in Puri. You couldn't go into the temple. They were very strict. I think even Indira Gandhi couldn't go in at that time. I could be wrong, but I think they were very strict about. There was a very structured seva schedule in the Jagannath Temple in Puri, and we could not go in. We went back and forth. I can't remember how. We must have taken a bus back to Mayapur because I asked Srila Prabhupada. Or maybe he was also in Calcutta some of the time. So I asked him, so is it okay if we go in to Jagannath Temple? And he said, yes. It's okay. It's like he wanted his Vaishnavas, he wanted his devotees to be able to go into the Puri temple, quite honestly. But the political structure in Puri did not allow for this. And so, being a little too brave, I decided that I would try to get in. But I failed. I'm a little too tall for an Indian, and they have a certain way of walking. But I put a cloak on, a charter on, but they could tell that I was not an Indian. And they ripped off the charter and beat me really hard, It was kind of depressing. I think I went to a Hanuman movie that night. I was so depressed. Anyway, that's what happened. That was my attempt at getting into the Puri temple. And Prabhupada found out about it. He wasn't very happy about it. And then he came down to Puri. And I remember we couldn't read the language, but we got an invitation, and Prabhupada was going to be speaking at a very important meeting. And it was a meeting of all the important Brahmin sevaks of the Jagannath temple. And I remember the invitation had a picture of Jagannath, and it was in red ink. And so Kusha and I were staying in Puri by now, and Prabhupada was coming. And so we went there to this very important meeting. And also, all of Prabhupada's disciples came in the two Hansadutta's buses, were filled with guys with sticks. I mean, sannyasis it was like 30 or 40 devotees. It was very impressive. I mean, big Mercedes buses with so many whiteys with, it was really impressive in India. In those days, it was like very impressive, like having a king or something, having a king walk in with his entourage. So we went, and we were just, two girls sitting at the back, and with our little kid, and Prabhupada was escorted to there was a stage by the beach, like a platform, and the ocean was nearby. And it was so astounding what he did. He spoke in English, for one thing, so we could understand. And I'm sure this was recorded. And if you ever get a chance, listen to it. It's the most shocking thing I ever saw, because I was aware of the politics in Puri and how it was like a big tension, because they didn't want the Westerners in, and there were some who wanted the Westerners to be able to come in to the temple. And if you understand, that's like super tension Indian. Their political stuff is sometimes around their mahants and they take it all really seriously. Anyway, so Prabhupada is speaking, and I could not believe what he did. He was telling them that this is Lord Jagannath. He is not Purinath. He is not Ketarnath. He is Jagannath. He is the Lord of the whole universe, the whole world. Lord Chaitanya did not approve of this, keeping devotees out because of the strictures. He wanted the devotees to be able to come. And he also said, these are Vaishnavas. They have come from so far. Halfway around the world, they've come thousands of miles. You should allow them to go into the temple. This was the gist of his lecture. And then he said, Jagannath can pack up and leave. I mean, he doesn't have to stay here. He can pack up and leave. He can go wherever he wants. You should allow my disciples to go into the temple. And he spoke with such fire. The whole time I was going, I can't believe he's doing this. Kusha, I cannot believe he's doing this. I can't believe it. I mean, he's so bold. This is so bold. And then he was supposed to, what he was invited to do was to speak about a book that one of the Pandas had written. And this book was, Prabhupada was a very famous personality in India now, with his ambassador car with the little flags and his big Mercedes buses and all of his sannyasis. He was like somebody you really want to introduce your book, right? So that was what he was into. That was what that invitation was about. He was like the guest of honor to introduce this one of the Panda's books. So then after saying all this outrageous stuff, there was a guy that came over to him, and we could see from a distance, we couldn't hear him, but he was showing Prabhupada the book and pointing to the book. In other words, hey, you got to talk about the book. We couldn't hear what he was saying, but you could see that, oh, you came here to talk about the book. And Prabhupada looked at the book and he said, oh, I do not know. And he got up and walked out. He walked off the stage, and then he walked across the beach. And this whole flock of sannyasis and devotees followed him, like 40 people, 40 of them or so. And the Pandas were just like, what hit us? They were just like sitting there, what was that? And he walked across the beach, and there was a Gaudiya Math temple. I don't know which one it was, but there was one there. And he went into this Gaudiya Math temple, one of his Guru Maharaj's temple, and there were deities. And there was this kirtan. We had this kirtan. It was the most incredible kirtan I'd ever been to. And it was, there were like 40 devotees all jumping up and down and chanting, and there was a chair provided for Prabhupada. He was sitting there, and Kusha's little boy was dancing in the center of the circle that was in front of the deities, just dancing and dancing. And this went on for I don't know how long. I turned to Kusha and said, if there's any heaven higher than this, I don't believe it. I don't believe there's any heaven. It was so ecstatic. And then, just as abruptly, after the Arctic, he got up and walked out and went to the car and the buses and left. And Kusha and I were still there, and the brahmacharis who ran the temple said, who was that? They were like, what was that about? Who is that? It was so astounding. I don't know which temple it was, but it was right by the beach in Puri. So that was one of the most exciting times that we had in India, was seeing that lecture was really amazing. And of course, Jagannath has come to America. He's not only packed up and left Puri, he's gone to Russia, he's gone to Europe, he's gone to South America. I don't know of any country he hasn't gone to by now. So this is the grace of Srila Prabhupada, the power of the pure devotee, to make incredible changes in this world for the better, all designed to bring about the golden age, all designed to bring... Lord Jagannath is the deity for this age of Kali. In previous ages there were different Chaitras, but Puri and Jagannath are actually for this age. And that's why Lord Chaitanya was there, that's right. Anyway, I guess that's enough, huh? Any questions? Everybody seems restless now. There's a lot of action going on. Any questions? Nice trip to India, huh?
Okay, I have one remark, one question. Isn't it that Srila Prabhupada also said, Lord Jagannath has gone to the West? No?
Did he say that in that lecture that night?
I don't know, but I know that he said it.
Well, he threatened them. I mean, he was literally threatening them that Jagannath can pack up and leave. And I was like, I can't believe he's doing this. And these were all the heads of Puri. They were all the leading sevaks, the Brahmins that run everything there. And he just, he kind of spit in their face. He's like, he told them what was going on. And they chose, but then, I forgot to say, they had a meeting the next day. There was a meeting, and we knew a particular Brahmin who was not exactly honest, but anyway, They had a meeting and they voted on it. And they voted that the Westerners could not come in. After that meeting, after the next day after that, because we were still there. And so still Westerners not allowed to go in.
You're kind of nationalist, isn't it? It's a bit nationalistic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even you have to be from a particular part of India. I'm not really sure how it works.
That's correct, yeah. It's not all everybody are voting. Some of the castes, they don't allow some of the castes in India, Indians.
Some of the castes are only allowed. It's not like everybody is allowed, Prabhu is saying.
It's a caste thing?
Yeah, they're like kind of.
But you see, Lord Chaitanya did not approve of that, and that was one of the things that Prabhupada was emphasizing in that lecture, that he did not approve it. I mean, he wanted Haridas Thakur to be able to go in. But of course Haridas Thakur was so humble, he chose not to. But Lord Chaitanya was trying to break up all of this artificial caste stuff and get everybody to have the mercy of God in this age. But that was very exciting.
The king of Orissa, His Royal Highness Divya Singha Dev, he was here, he visited the temple, he gave a sword to Singha Dev, and I drove him around a little bit and brought him to the train at the end. And he also went to Ratha Yatra in Berlin.
Oh, really?
He visited all kinds of all the ISKCON temples here in Europe.
When?
Oh, many years ago.
But it was after Prabhupada left.
About 20 years ago.
But after Prabhupada left.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the changes are continuing. It didn't stop there. It's like he put them in action, he started them, and they're continuing. Lord Jagannath is gradually being, I mean, there's Rath Yatras in all kinds of places now. I mean, 14 of them in Florida. We always say in America that that's why we have such a good governor in Florida, because it's not as destroyed as other places, because there's Rath Yatras, and Lord Jagannath likes having his trips to the beach, no? He likes to have his festivals. So it's changing, and of course it's going to change more and more as time goes on. But we have a big responsibility. Fortunate that we have Lord Nrsingadev here. Very fortunate. So any questions? I think Ananta Krishna had his hand up, but I don't know if he asked this question.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Kumbh Mela and the reason why Prabhupada wanted to go and the risk there, and also the preaching in Kumbh Mela?
Oh, the preaching in Kumbh Mela. Why did Prabhupada want to go to the Mela?
Yes. And
because it's a huge preaching opportunity. I mean, it's the biggest preaching opportunity in India. You have 20 million people who are interested in spiritual life.
But how was preaching to them?
Well, the devotees were going out with books, like in legions of devotees out on Sankirtan parties and books, and also there was they have a big at the camp. There's a temple room set up. There's like deities, there's like a whole, and there's prasadam distribution. It's like having a temporary temple in the wilderness, and thousands of people coming in and out. It's a very, very important preaching opportunity. Even now, I'm sure the devotees do it, don't they? They do the melas, right there. You know? I mean,
yeah, they do. They do. Yes, they do. When it happens every 12 years. I heard that ISKCON is there.
Yeah, well, I went years later, after Prabhupada left. I used to travel India all over, and I went to one in Haridwar, and it was huge one. I don't know which year it was, I don't remember, but there was a big tent, big festival, deities, the works. I mean, it's like a huge event that happens only, I think it's every 7 years in Haridwar, I'm not really sure. That's the one I got lost at, and I had to have the police drive me around to find my... How do you find your camp whenever every camp has a bunch of saffron people in it? It was really kind of frightening, you know, because there's so many different mats and mahants. There's the Shaivites, there's the yogis, there's the various, I don't know what they are, groups, I guess you'd say, and they all have their tents as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
It's exciting, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I saw yogis that were doing all kinds of far out stuff. There was one yogi that he was living underwater, you know. You could see the patch of mud on top of his head, and he never came up for air and stuff like that, you know. And the snake charmers, you got these snakes, and they're doing stuff. And it's like exotic to the max. Yeah, you should go sometime.
Maybe in ISKCON camps. You know.
Yeah, you want to be in a safe place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that it's unsafe, it's just that it's unsafe whenever they're making the stampede into the water. That's when it's unsafe. You have to be careful at that time. But I wanted to go a few years ago. There was another one, but I didn't go. It's become too difficult to travel in India. It's not like it used to be when they got satellite television. Now they have all this insanity that they didn't have back then. I traveled alone all over India for years and never had any problems, never had any trouble. You couldn't pay me to do that now. I would not do that. It's not safe. Not at all safe. And in fact, for any young girls that might be wanting to go to India, you have to be very careful. Very careful. Don't look in anyone's eyes. Keep your eyes down, because that's how they get control. You don't look in their eyes. And you're very careful, and you don't be alone anywhere. My girlfriend Kusha, she's like a social worker in Vrindavan. Well, right now she's running Honolulu Temple, but she lives in Vrindavan. She has a flat there. And she has an office, and she's like, helps devotees find places to live while they're there. She helps them, if they get sick, takes them to the doctor. She's kind of a social worker, is the only way I can put it, but at Vrindavan Temple. And she's had to deal with some really ugly rape cases, you know, from girls who come there and don't know and end up in the hospital having been raped or beaten or something. So just be very careful, any young girls. Be very careful in India. You don't ever go anywhere alone, and don't ever look in their eyes. Yeah, very careful. I'm telling you because you got some young girls here, you know. Anything else? Hare Krishna.
And in that period, was Prabhupada already sick?
What?
Like in the period you went to India, 1976, 1977. How was Prabhupada's health at that period?
I hear you, but your Italian accent got me on that one.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to understand.
Sorry, no, you went to India in 1976 and 1977.
Yeah.
And how was Prabhupada's health at that period? Prabhupada's health.
She got Prabhupada's
Health.
His health?
Yeah.
Well, he was having a little swelling in his hands and feet, but otherwise, when I was there, he was fine. He was really full blast. Like I was there in Bombay, and he was preaching like incredibly, and then he was still fine. I remember going to visit him in Calcutta, and his coat was lying on the bed, and I was looking a little ragged. This coat that I designed for him, with the fur, it's a saffron coat with the peacock feathers. I had sent him almost 10 years before, and it was looking kind of ragged, and I said, do you want me to make you a new coat? Do you need me to clean this or make me a new coat? He says, no need, it's fine. And so I talked with him at that time. And at that time I was thinking of moving to Vrindavan. Because whenever you get to Vrindavan the first time, it's like, oh, I'm home. I don't want to go anyplace else, you know. Especially back then, the peacocks and birds, not so much traffic, not like now. But it was very beautiful, and so Kusha and I were planning to buy a place in Vrindavan. We had the plan to have a place in Vrindavan and a place in America, and be able to go back and forth. And so Prabhupada was telling me, first of all, you try Mayapur. He was saying, first of all, you live in Vrindavan, then you decide. But he gave us permission to have Bhagaji, his friend, to help us buy land there. I later did buy land there. It was a very difficult, not a good decision. But anyway, he told me, first of all, you see Mayapur, because it was before we had gone to Mayapur, it was in Calcutta. And he said, then you decide, Mayapur or Vrindavan. So, anyway.
What would, and I have two questions. How was like Prabhupada's katha different from the American and European one in India? How was Prabhupada's katha?
Srila Prabhupada
Preaching.
in India, how was it different than in America?
Oh, it was so much more complicated. The Indian people already have a basis. In America, he's like just like lifting from here to here, you know, try not to kill animals and don't eat meat and, you know, karma. But the Indian people generally, Prabhupada used to say, even the man in the field, the poor farmer in the field, has an understanding of karma, has a basic understanding of karma, an understanding of God, stuff that America didn't have. Although I think the word karma is now in the American dictionary, isn't it? It is, yeah. It's now in the English dictionary. A lot of what Prabhupada introduced is now a part of the culture. Yoga was unheard. People didn't know what that was at that time. So the culture has already, in 60 years, changed tremendously, and it looks like it's going to change some more. But he was preaching in India was much more, that's why I was so impressed when he was preaching to this yogi. I had never heard him talk like that before. I mean, he knew, he hit all the beats, you know, Mayavad, you name it, just much more complex than in America. And even in America, you can hear him preach in San Francisco or in New York. You'll see there's a difference in the lectures if you analyze it. And in Hawaii, they were different also. The Hawaii lectures were very different from the ones in New York. I mean, the same information, but geared for the audience. He could tell, I mean, there would be times when I would try to guess what he was going to say, you know, because a person would ask a question, and I would think in myself, oh, he's going to answer it like that, and he would answer it totally differently, because he could tell where that person was coming from, what his consciousness was like. It's pretty amazing to have somebody be able to do that. Just go into your mind and know exactly where you're thinking and where you're at. But it's true. It's true. That's what it was like. Got it?
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry. Before I was, you know, you told me that I looked bored, but I was thinking about the cold. You know how the Indian cold you had in Kumbh Mela. The cold. The cold, yeah, I had a cough for 2 weeks after. No, the cold, the cold. How cold it was in Kumbh Mela. Yeah, it was cold. It was cold. I told you I had straw under my sleeping bag, but a lot of people didn't. And even then, I had a cough for a couple of weeks afterwards. But you know, somehow or other, we survived it, and I'm really glad we went. I mean, it was an amazing historical time.
somehow you don't realize when you're doing something, you don't realize that this is historical and you're never going to be able to do it again. I mean, nobody knew that Prabhupada was going to be leaving in 77. We had no idea. No idea. He left, we left him in March, February, March, and he left in October,
November.
in Kartik.
Yeah.
A few months later. Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? That was only a few months later.
Yeah. He was still so powerful, you know, some months. Before before his leaving, he was still so powerful, you know, in his preaching, in his... So.
But I think he was up in Rishikesh, and I was not there, I had gone back to America. And he was in Rishikesh, and he suddenly decided to go back to Vrindavan because he knew that he was going to be leaving. He told them that. But then he came to England. I don't know, there's a lot of things I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't know. He came to England, you know that, right? He was thinking he was going to go to the States. He was planning to go to the States. But he wasn't able to continue the journey, and he went back to Vrindavan and left. But even then, you see, we didn't know. I would have gone to Vrindavan in a heartbeat. I would have hopped the next jet to Vrindavan, but the devotees weren't informed. There's some issues there. But the devotees didn't know. This is probably one of the most painful things that we don't even talk about, that he wanted his disciples to come. And they didn't come because they didn't know that they were being invited, that he was calling them all to come. Because sometimes, you know, like your grandfather is dying, for example, or your mother is dying. She wants the family around, right? Isn't that normal?
Yes. Yeah.
That's normal in every culture, whether it's Italian or Japanese or whatever, it's normal. And he knew he was leaving, and he was calling all his disciples to come. And we were deceived. We were not able to come. In fact, when the devotees got back, who were there, like Bardraj, Siddhasarup, Chandi, Gaurasundar, I know several who were there. What's his name? Chaitanya Rupa. There were several personal friends of mine that were there, like, oh, why didn't you guys come? Prabhupada was calling you. Why didn't you come? Bardraj said, like this, Amiyatma was saying, why didn't you come? We were told not to go. So that was a very unfortunate, painful thing that a lot of Prabhupada disciples are still not very, we don't think about it much, but it hurt. Do you know that? Did you know that?
No.
You didn't know that?
No. No. In the book, in the Prabhupada Ilamrita, it's written that the discussions that were among devotees, you know, when he was very sick some days before leaving this world.
I don't know, because I don't remember reading. Yeah, what did he say? What did he say?
In the Prabhupada Lilamrita, it's written that devotees had many discussions about calling the devotees, not calling them from abroad, and also bringing Prabhupada.
What does it say?
That there were a disagreement between among devotees, you know, and then it was decided that GBC had to stay in their home temple, And then that also Prabhupada wanted to go to Mayapur, and then somebody, then he was very determined in that, and then like the devotees decided to keep him in Vrindavan.
The devotees decided what?
To keep
him in Vrindavan.
Oh. Well, no, he wanted to stay in Vrindavan. He wanted to stay in Vrindavan. But he wanted all the devotees to come at that time. But we were very young, and now we're more mature, and we would probably handle things very differently now than we did at that time. I think most of us were just so naive, we just thought he'd be here forever. I always thought that he won't leave until he finishes Srimad Bhagavatam. Obviously, I was wrong, because he didn't finish it. Anyway, we grow up, we learn things. Any more questions?
No, for me it's enough. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Wasn't much of a class, was it?
But that's what we want to hear. That's what we want to hear, the stories we never heard before. That's what we want to hear, the stories we never heard before.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I can get sarcastic, and that was really terrible. They didn't let us come. But I don't want to say too much. So is this Mahawater?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Is this Mahawater? Good day,
Yes, is it Mahawater? Is it from this? I don't know. Shall I bring you Mahawater?
No, we're going to get milk, but is this Mahawater?
I don't know. I really don't know. Who brought the water? Who brought the water? Kishori brought it.
You want your book? The book?
Oh, the book. The girls were bringing a couple of them.
Here, yeah?
Oh, okay.
Is it?
Okay.
There is one.
Because she's eating.
How much is it? Oh, that's you? That's you?
That's me. Yeah, I was young at one time. Believe it or not. We were all young at one time, right? I don't think my slicer is in here. I have a slicer. I need to get another slicer.
This is nice.
To open the foil.
Yeah, I have a thing that slices it nicely. I guess I could use a fingernail, but it doesn't work as good. Ha! I did it. So who is this for?
For Akila and Suchitra.
Okay, for Akila. A-K-H-I-L-Y-A.
No, A only.
Huh?
L-A. Akila.
A-K-I.
I-L-A.
Akila. Oh, no Y. Okay, Akila.
Yeah.
Okay. And Suchitra. I know how to spell Suchitra because I have a god sister named Suchitra. Yeah.